We have more information on the story that just won't end, and it seems like we're getting new stuff every day or every other day in regards to Jonathan Kuminga re-signing with the Golden State Warriors. There's that on the table. There's multiple other things on the table, like a sign-in trade, all these other things, the qualifying offer is in there somewhere. But ultimately, though, we are awaiting resolution, and especially Golden State, because they want to figure out what is happening here to know the number that they can give the other guys based on what they're giving to Jonathan Kuminga. There's a lot of different conflicting reports on this, but ultimately what I think we've settled on is that Golden State firstly offered Kuminga a $30 million extension this time last year when he became eligible. He turned that down, bet on himself. That's perfectly fine. However, things didn't work out in his favor. He had a lot of DMPs, things like that. Steve actually was on the record saying, I don't think he can play with our other guys. And that's a pretty damning thing to say about a young player on your team, especially one that you had for a while there, a couple of years back, tried to bill as being the next thing on your roster when you were really deep into the two timeline thing. But anyway, Jonathan now wants that $30 million back. But the Warriors are like, yeah, no, we don't want to give you 30 anymore. We want to give you closer to 20 because that $30 million deal, we're not going to want to trade you. We're not going to be able to trade you with that number. And the thing about that is that if he is dead set on that 30, that also creates some complications because the other team, and this is where they should have probably traded him previously, maybe earlier in the season, prior to last season, whatever. But the other team that's going to get Jonathan in-house will be taking him on with the direct need to pay. They're going to get him in-house and be like, oh, we got to pay him $30 million annually. Who knows if he's going to be exactly what we needed. Whereas before, had the Warriors traded him, that team could have got a trial run with him, seeing if they liked him, seeing if he's worth that amount of money and an increased role and an increased minutes, usage, all that stuff. But now they're going to have to just trade for him if that's what they ultimately settle on. And that's where it's a little bit tricky just all around because Jonathan is not trying to take anything less than that. And I think with situations like this, you may hit a point where, like I said earlier, you just got to take the qualifying offer, which the Warriors absolutely do not want to have happen here. But we'll see what happens ultimately. But we have some new reports from Tim Kawakami and Anthony Slater, both talking about this stuff. There also is a report from somebody that does Sacramento local radio talking about the fact that if they are able to bring in Jonathan Kuminga, as has been rumored, they have been linked to Jonathan Kuminga for sign and trade possibilities, DeMar DeRozan may be on his way out. So make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe here to the Basketball Bulletin, where Trevor Lane and I keep you guys locked in and informed with all the latest around the NBA. We're going to watch this video. But just to summarize, the Golden State Warriors requirements thus far in Jonathan Kuminga trade talks, at least one first-round pick, a good young player, and no bad contracts in return. Well, damn, what else do you want? You want me to massage your feet, give you a cup of cold lemonade? All that? No. Okay, in all seriousness, I don't have a problem with the asking price. I just don't know if they can get it. All that stuff, maybe they can get two of those things, one of those things. They may have to settle on something. They have a very clear, if you're Golden State, you have a very clear path laid out ahead of you with your cap sheet and all that stuff. So, the main thing I think they don't want to have happen is take on a bad contract. I think they can maybe do without one of the other things. If they're not taking on a long-term bad salary that will impact their books a couple of years from now, I think that's probably the most important thing. But you may have to compromise. You may have to settle on something. All right, let's listen to what he says here.
Situation, including they've been very part of the reason that a sign and trade hasn't got done for Kuminga. There's been, particularly the Kings and Suns, I would say, have been the most aggressive, is because the Warriors have been pretty steadfast in their requirement of at least a first round pick. They also want a young player, and they don't want to take on bad contracts. And that's what's really, held a lot of this stuff up, because it's like, not only does the team have to want to sign Jonathan Kuminga, convince Jonathan Kuminga to take this dollar amount, and he has high ambitions for his next contract, but also they then have to call the Warriors and basically make, a pretty decent value trade where you're giving up a pick and a young player, that type of stuff. That's why so much of this stuff is just in gridlock.
And while I cracked the joke on them a second ago, if you're the Golden State Warriors, you shoot high. That's not the wrong position to take, right? I don't think they're getting all of that, but that doesn't mean that shouldn't be what they ask for, right? They should be trying to get the most out of him, especially given that he is a young player. I do think he has value. I think he is somebody that is going to blossom in an increased role. He just doesn't fit with Golden State. It's not so much just the role. He just doesn't fit. The inability to make the snap judgment decisions, to play within their system, I think is the biggest thing. But the inability to shoot certainly doesn't help either, especially since they've started employing Jimmy Butler. Like, it doesn't really work. So ultimately, though, I do think that he's got value, and I can understand wanting to get back that stuff. And getting a young player back is actually particularly interesting to me, because how young is a young player? 25 and under? Is that what you're considering young in this case? Are they on their initial rookie deal? Are you looking for somebody like that? Are you looking for somebody that's already been extended? And if they've been extended, do you want them to already have a couple of years in? Is it a fresh extension? Who qualifies here? Like, what specifically are they looking for? They have been linked to other young players throughout these trade pursuits, but they don't like those guys that they would be getting back, at least in the packages that have been offered to them, mostly from Sacramento and mostly from Phoenix as well. So we do have this article from Tim Kawakami, like I was mentioning earlier. We're going to go through it bit by bit. The Warriors don't want to give Kuminga away for less than his full trade value because they're trying to maintain every asset they've got if the Antetokounmpo market heats up. And that, I think, is where a lot of teams are at. I think a lot of teams are kind of in this spot where they're trying to really line themselves up for that offseason or a potential snap trade. Like, you don't want to be in a position where you give up your first round picks or whatever, and then a week later, Giannis is like, oh, I want to trade. And you don't have the assets. You don't have the salaries. You don't have the ability to make that trade. Whereas, otherwise you would have potentially, and maybe he would have liked it to go there, but you just don't have what you need in order to get a deal like that done. I still don't think Giannis is going to get traded, but I mean, to be fair, he did. There was the thing about like mid-July back in the beginning of the month and all that, seeing how things shaped up for them. Remember that stuff? We never really did get more about that. All that's kind of happened is that some minor things have happened, like him talking ISO Speed saying, oh, he'll probably stay in Milwaukee. Oh, you need to come see me play in Milwaukee, things like that. I don't think he's leaving, and I think the longer it takes, the less likely it is. But I mean, if you're these other teams, you're doing your due diligence by trying to position yourself towards that until he comes out and says otherwise, right? And so for the Warriors, they don't want to lose an asset in Kuminga and not get assets in return, basically. There's another reason why the Warriors don't want to give Kuminga away for less than his full trade value. If you're looking to build a trade around a young player who could step right into a barren roster and give a transitioning team a burst of energy, well, I think the Warriors might have a candidate to bring up if Milwaukee ever asks. That is, the Warriors and Kuminga can agree on a solid deal this summer. Then they'll both look to the future. So is he implying that they could get a good deal on Kuminga and then use him as part of this trade? That's also possible, but if it's not going to be immediately this summer, then I don't really see it happening, right? But that could be interesting if they do re-sign Kuminga at a good number and then put him in a deal for Giannis. That doesn't mean the Warriors expect Giannis to ask to leave the Bucks or that they expect him to signal that the Bay Area is his preferred destination. Yeah, that's the thing about it too. You need both of those things. That's why I mentioned earlier, like if he wanted to go there, you need to also have that too. But I do think he would like to go play with Curry. And he would fit amazingly with Curry. That would be a great fit, to be honest. Who knows on all that? Giannis might never leave Milwaukee, or if he decides he has to, he might have players other than Curry and Draymond he'd like to join. But the possibility exists that Giannis could want out and could tell the Bucks that they should trade him to the Warriors, and then it would be up to the Warriors to meet Milwaukee's price if possible. The Warriors aren't the only team thinking about positioning for this, of course. They certainly wouldn't be the team with the most assets to offer if and when Milwaukee decides to contemplate a deal, but the Warriors want to be ready for this, and bringing Kuminga back for, say, 3 years and 22 to 25 million a year would be a fairly interesting step in this very presumptive process. That is actually really interesting. I just don't think Kuminga wants that overall, but maybe he takes the chance to bet on himself again, because with that, maybe 2 and a player option could do the job for Kuminga at that point, and he can opt out a couple of years from now and then try to re-sign after that. But yeah, he's absolutely in a really weird spot here. Do you think Kuminga takes that offer? Now, there's one last thing that Trevor had sent me from Slater that I wanted to cover here. And this is actually really important. Part of the reason you haven't seen the Warriors make moves is because the moment they second apron cap themselves. They give a team like Utah, a team like Brooklyn, a dollar amount that the Warriors can't match for Kuminga. This is actually a really big deal, and it's something I don't think many people are thinking about. I absolutely didn't think about this. Part of the potential Al Horford addition would be using the taxpayer MLE that would second apron cap the Warriors. Part of the reason they're being very careful, and you've seen them make 0 moves, is because the moment they second apron cap themselves, they give a team like Utah and a team like Brooklyn, who have stayed out of the Kuminga sweepstakes, the moment you give them a dollar amount that the Warriors can't match, you can either steal him away or even force the Warriors to have to send off a piece with a pick potentially to you to retain him. That's cold-blooded. That I think answers why these guys are comfortable waiting, because they know, I think Horford knows he's going to be getting, some of that taxpayer MLE. That's a pretty straightforward thing. But if he's signed and all that's completed beforehand, well, then they're going to get limited in the amount that they can offer Kuminga, which means that these other teams can swoop in and say, hey, you want him? Give us something. Or, hey, we're just going to steal him because you can't match this, because it is what it is. That's if he signs an offer sheet somewhere. Dude, when's the last time somebody signed an offer sheet? It feels like I haven't seen that in a couple of years. Teams typically don't like to do that because that space gets put on hold and all that stuff. But yeah, that's interesting. So they could be in a situation like this for a while, and it's ultimately just a staring contest. Whoever decides to blink first is going to be, I forgot, I didn't realize we didn't switch the page. My bad. We've just been staring at Wendy. Whoops, that's my bad. I'm used to having Trevor manage that. That is absolutely my bad. But that's interesting that they could be in a position where they have to deal with that for quite a while overall. But let me know what you guys think on that. So I wanted to transition to the DeMar DeRozan stuff. There's a possible handshake agreement between the Kings and DeMar DeRozan that they will move him if they acquire Kuminga, per the Styles files. And this is a Sacktown Sports Radio as well. One idea is Terry Rozier and 2 second rounders. Okay, I guess. I mean, what is DeMar's value in 2025? I don't know that he's got a lot of value. He was still good for the Kings last year. He still does what you need him to do. Still one of the best tough shot mid-range makers in the NBA. Great scorer as a result. Able to get to his spots really well. Has lost a bit of a step. Also is somebody that's more of a 3-4 as opposed to, a perimeter player like a guard or anything like that anymore. He's not so much of a shooting guard anymore. He's more of a 3. And they actually, honestly, over the last 5 or 6 years have put him in a lot of splits where he's 3/4 of the time at small forward, but then getting a good chunk of his minutes as well at power forward. Looking at last year, he was primarily a power forward. That 23-24, this is a year back. It's not showing the current year. No. The calendar slipped over. I'm tripping. Anyway, 23-24, he was 60% of his time at power forward. So he's even the year prior. So he's 68 then 32. So he's been a power forward a good bit. The year before that, he was 74% of his time at power forward. So he plays more there. But, I mean, you see what happened with Sacramento last year. When he was at the 4 for them, they were super good. 97th percentile points per possession, 97th percentile effective field goal percentage, 99th percentile free throw rate. They couldn't guard a parked car, though, but they were great at scoring. And that's mostly the DeMar experience in 2025, I think, summed up. Still able to get you buckets. I'm not really questioning that. I just think that you need more athletes around him, solid defensive players around him. And the Sacramento Kings just don't have that. And so if you're going to bring in Jonathan Kuminga, if you're Sacramento, I do think you need to get rid of some of these guys. They just don't have they don't have any other guys like that they I think you need to, if you're Sacramento, maybe get rid of 5 or 6 of these guys and just retool the roster entirely. In my opinion, there's just too much overlap with the players that they currently have, and Kuminga would be more of the same. So I do think that in that case, you probably should try to get rid of DeMar. But who's going to want DeMar? I'm curious about that. Post down below which team you think he would be good on overall based on the amount of salary he has. He's got a $24 million player option, or a $24 million contract, something like that, based on the page here. So let's go ahead and transition over to that video and see what they have to say.
And I believe, now this is specifically me, I believe that there is a handshake agreement between DeMar DeRozan and the Sacramento Kings. That is my belief. If Jonathan Kuminga is acquired by the Sacramento Kings will get their butts in gear as far as getting DeMar DeRozan to another team. And what I mean by that is there are people in this space, the Danny Ainges, guys like that, they never want to lose a trade or the perception of losing a trade. And I know that we've brought up before the situation with the Miami Heat, right? And do you just take Terry Rozier 2 seconds and it's essentially a salary dump? Obviously, you're not getting a player back that's as good as DeMar DeRozan, but DeMar DeRozan gets to go to a contender. You're going to get money that's eventually going to come off the books if Terry Rozier even plays.
He's in Miami, right? Is that a contender? I don't know. Does DeMar make them a contender? I don't think so either. But anyway, regardless, semantics. But yeah, I mean, they may be in a position where they have to do some sort of salary dump if they really want to get him out of there. Because I don't know if teams are going to be willing to give up an asset for DeMar. And maybe he's even a buyout guy. Like, I don't know. Ultimately, that may be where they have to go. But I think if you're Sacramento, you're trying to get something done. I don't know if Terry Rozier is exactly what you want, but in that case, you'd be valuing those second-round picks. And I think that's asset enough to get DeMar off the team, get him happy somewhere else, and maybe get a return for him. I don't know if you're going to be able to do some of the stuff the Warriors are trying to do, of course, get a young player, all that stuff. They're not in a position with DeMar to be able to do something like that. But I wanted to pull it up here. DeMar has been really healthy. 77, 79, 74, 76 games played, 22 points per game. Obviously still can't shoot that three ball to the degree you want him to. He's never going to develop it that way. But at what he does, he's still good. Like I said, 4 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Just, again, not great defensively, but able to score in troves for you. So I think that it depends also on what kind of role he's going to want. Like, I assume he's going to want to go somewhere, go to a contender, be a starting player, big contributor. But I think that the world of possibilities really, really would open for him if he was okay with being like a sixth man type. Because if he was okay being a sixth man coming in, scoring about 15 points per game, he would be a huge boon to somebody's team. And in that role, playing maybe 27 or so minutes a night, 25, 27 minutes a night, you can mask the defensive deficiencies and put him out there. And I think he'd be huge. Like, you could put him on any team and he'd be a huge contributor, may even be the difference between, at that point with that production off your bench, especially if you have a weaker one, may even be the difference between you being able to win something or not. Like, who knows ultimately. I'm just curious about what the Sacramento Kings plan is, because I don't think he knows. I don't think Sabonis knows. I don't think anybody knows, but we'll see what happens ultimately. Let me know what you guys think, though, about the Kuminga situation overall. What should the Warriors do? I'm curious what you guys think.